everyone. Welcome to the Snowball Wealth podcast, where we talk about how to get out of debt and start building wealth. In this special episode, we have one of our community members, Rosi, sharing her wealth building journey from managing debt and changing habits to now strategizing on what's next with our money coach, Anna.
Sure. So before we actually get started, I just wanted to make everybody aware, although I am a certified financial planner, today's session is designed to be educational in nature and not intended to be considered any advice. And so we just have to give that disclaimer before we get started.
Yeah, and to get started, Rosi, would love for you to share a little bit about your story and a little bit about yourself for the people listening.
Hello, my name is Rosi. My financial journey has been an interesting one. From the time that I was 18, I was really just in and out of debt. Like, it was great because I'd get out of it, but then I'd get right back in because I didn't set myself up for success. So in 2020, I found the Snowball community, and it has been a complete mind shift when it comes to debt and really just talking about financials in general.
So to get started there, I guess like the first question would be, where are you right now in your debt journey? Like, where did you start and where are you?
So in 2020, July 2020, where the world was ending, I was super
That
scared.
wonderful year.
I was really scared because I did not have an emergency fund. But you know what I did have? A lot of debt. So it was one of those things where if I happened to lose my job, I would be in very unfortunate circumstances. So when I met the Snowball Wealth community, I'm like, okay, emergency fund. Let's start one of those. Let's, figure out what our goal is. And that was my first focus, and figuring out what my net worth was, because if you know how much you owe and how much you have, then it makes it easier to figure out where you need to be. This was the same time that I found out about
Right.
F.I.R.E, and like, I didn't have to wait until 65 to retire to have the non-existent Social Security.
Absolutely.
So it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, get your life together. Let's do this emergency fund. Let's figure out how we get to F.I.R.E. And by the end of that year, I was at positive net worth. Well, I was at zero net worth, which positive, yay. I started at negative 10,000.
Right.
So definitely progress.
Okay.
And my
That's
emergency,
That is.
yeah, my emergency account was set, and it was just like, okay, next step, debt. So 2021, I've been tackling my debt. I started with 19,000 in credit card debt, not counting my student loan debt, which is still at $30,000. But by January of 2022, I will be credit card debt free, and all of that money will be going towards student loans because Papa Biden is not coming through.
Great. Let's hope that he does, at least on some level. But okay, so that's great. So you started off kind of the first step, it sounds like, is a step that I normally recommend to most clients, which is get a hold of where you are. Because so often I think whenever we start a money journey, paying off debt or building wealth, we don't even know the starting point, like where we are and so when you don't know that, you don't know where to go. So my next question for you would be, what did you find the most challenging about that? When you realized where you were and you were faced with the prospect of where you were going, what challenges did you face?
It felt like a really big mountain to climb. Yeah, it was one of those things where I was just like, oh, $1 million, and that's how I get to retire, and I'm at negative 10,000. I'm never gonna make
Right.
it. And it was just,
And that's I think, go ahead.
it was just giving myself little goals and just like itty bitty things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is especially in the traditional financial planning area when we talk about retirement, it's always pretty standard. It's, work really hard, save as much as you can, and then retire at 65, 70 even. And there's not a lot of education around any other strategies. So one of the biggest strategies that I normally tell people, especially when they're looking to retire, and you mentioned FIRE, which some people might not know what that is, but it's financial independence, retire early. And so, whenever people are looking to retire early, one of the major steps of that outside of saving and lowering your expenses is to pay off your debt. Because essentially, when it comes to debt, it's money that you're more than likely going to have to pay back, and it weighs on your budget. So now that you're on that journey, you're what, 1 month away from being credit card debt free.
Woo!
Yay!
What do you feel like that's going to look like? What are you most looking forward to in being debt free?
I am. Wow, I hadn't even thought about that. Okay. What am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to not having,
It's like that, right?
yeah, like not having that kind of like stress or like pressure on my chest that there's this money that I borrowed in a way and that I've just been paying back for so long. It's like not having that stress and focusing on my student loans and being able to put extra money on top of the minimum payment so that I can finish in 18 months is the goal. Otherwise, it'd be taking me 4 years to finish paying off my student loans, and I'm over
Mm.
it. I'm tired. I'm in my 30s now, and this isn't life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the reasons why I asked that question of how does that fit? What do you expect when you become debt free? Is because when we think about where we're starting, a lot of times we're pretty accustomed to where we've been. And that change in terms of what it feels like to be debt free can kind of overwhelm you when you actually get there. What I've heard from so many clients is that once they reach it, it's almost anticlimactic because it's like, okay, here I am. Now what? And so I think for this coaching session, it would be interesting to help you perhaps even develop a strategy for what are you going to do in terms of next steps. So now I kind of throw it to you, and I know it's just out of the blue, but what are your goals? If you thought to yourself, it doesn't even have to be purely financial, but if you design the life that you want, what does that look like for you?
So, in a not COVID world, I just want to travel. Like I let's
Ooh.
say I don't have a 9 to 5 anymore, and I even with a 9 to 5, like I want to go on like a quarterly vacation and just go go to Europe. I've never been to Europe. I've literally been to the Caribbean. Like
Mhm.
that's as far as we've gone. So like a trip to Australia, a trip to Paris, and go to Versailles. Like that's the kind of stuff I want to do. And
Mm.
I honestly just realized that I've never let myself imagine or like felt like I could do it because I can afford it, but if in order to afford it right now, I'd have to get into more debt, and we don't want to do that. Like that's
Mm.
this is the
Right, so you wanna be
cycle.
proactive at this point.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. So that's
So for our listeners, I think that that's I was just going to say that for our listeners, I think that that's very beneficial because I think oftentimes when we start the journey, even to FIRE, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people in the FIRE community is once you retire early, now what? You have this money that you're not accustomed to. Now, what do you do? And I think that it's important in order to actually be able to live those goals is to plan ahead for that, but then to also one of the ways to do that, I think, is to go back. So asking yourself, why did you end up in debt in the first place? And then strategizing a plan going forward to avoid doing it again.
gotcha. Yeah, I feel like
So
some of the things that got me
if
into debt
you,
was traveling.
what was that?
One of the some of the things that got me into debt was the whole travel thing because I'd just be like, my credit card can afford it. Let's go.
No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I think for And Tanya, I think you can attest to this, but most people in the community, when we ask, what are you going into debt for? It's normally food and just eating out. And so when we think about credit cards, because they are so convenient and you just swipe it, it's so tempting and so easy to do. So if we look at kind of one of the strategies to prevent that, to stop yourself from going back into debt, one of them would be to look at what might tempt you to do so. So you mentioned travel. Was there anything else that placed you into debt?
Um, it was more of like an emotional thing. Like, I feel sad, I'm gonna buy
Mm.
myself things, and things didn't help. So
Mm.
then I bought
Mm,
more things,
Yeah.
and it was just like an
Mm.
yeah,
ongoing. I'm going to buy myself clothes because I feel sad. So we're
Yeah.
dealing
And
with
I think
that in
that's so
different ways
common.
now.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think, Anna, you mentioned this in one of your workshops too, how, sometimes when we overspend, it's because we are lacking something. Go ahead. And I think in your own words, you say it in a great way.
yeah. So one of the things that I always say is when we tend to spend more when we feel less, but also what I've done in coaching sessions as well is to actually go back through those credit card statements and look at what you bought and then asking yourself the why. And it sounds like you're pretty honest with yourself about why it happened. But for a lot of people, what they don't realize is how much money we spend placating ourselves whenever there's something that we're not okay about. So if we're overworked and stressed, we can easily justify spending exorbitant amount of money on eating out, which most of the time is not good on your wallet or your health. um, and then, like you said, the retail therapy. I mean, we even have a term for it, retail therapy. We go out and we spend that money. So now that you know that you have that's something that could potentially happen, what is your plan going forward to not ever fall back into those habits?
I actually thought of one more thing. So
Okay.
last time, so I'm moving in April because I need to move. I just need a change of scenery, and
Okay.
I don't want to live here anymore. So my first thought is like, okay, you move, what if we can find a cheaper rent so that we can save more money and do
Oh,
Hmm.
this debt
nice.
payoff thing a little faster? Like, what if we do that?
Yeah.
So looking at apartments, and I'm like, I'm really bougie, and these apartments are just not doing it for me. So, so then I look at more
Safety
expensive.
should always be top priority, though.
I want a balcony and a pool. So there's safety, and then there's just
Yeah.
me. So
Luxury.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time at home, and I like being comfortable, and I like being happy with my space, and I need to bring my Peloton with me. So there are things to consider here. So then I started looking at more expensive apartments. Like, how far can we go? How far can we go until we can't afford it anymore? And I'm like,
Mm,
it feels like we are going to overspend money, and then we will have to make more
Mm.
money to
mm,
catch up to the decision that we're making right now. Or you can find cheaper rent and get out of there in two
Mhm.
years once your
right.
debt is paid off. So let's go with less.
That's such an interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you're catching yourself as like almost like preventing yourself from falling into these older habits. And
Yes.
I actually want to kind of go back to the fact that you paid off so much debt this year and that you have made so much progress. And I want to dig in a little bit more to that, Rosie, because you said it, and it is a huge accomplishment. Like, I think that sometimes it takes people decades or a lifetime sometimes to break the cycle. um can you tell us a little bit more on, like, when was the aha moment of like switching over to like being determined, to pay it off? Because I think that's what I find is like a common theme when someone makes that shift. It's like they have this moment and they're just like, you know what, this isn't me anymore. I'm gonna make a big
Right.
change. So, like, do you remember that moment at all, Rosie? And can you talk
Yeah.
us about that a little bit?
So after I did my net worth, uh, I'm an Excel girl, so there are spreadsheets, there are tabs, there are things calculating. It's a thing, and I love it. But once I looked at how much debt I had, what my payments were, and I don't do minimum payments. I pay extra, but I was still in debt because I would also spend money. So yeah. Anywho,
Mm.
Mhm.
I was undigging the hole, but then digging the hole again. So I was basically just playing with dirt. So
Mm.
there was I was setting it up, and I'm like, okay, this is how much money I have. And right now, I can't remember what it was at that point in time. So right now, I have like 60,000 in assets, but I have 30,000 in debt. So it's like, sis, if you stop having this much debt, you will have this much net worth. And that was the
Right.
factor for me where I was just
Mm.
like, so we eliminate the debt, our net worth goes up, and we can retire early. So
Mm.
that was the point for me where I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? What credit card are we paying off first? Like, where are we getting this money from? And I became laser focused on getting this done,
Mm.
which is great.
Mm. And
That's my thing. I become so focused and I'm so good at it. And then it's like, okay, I'm done. Back to digging myself into this hole that I got
Mm.
the circle of
yeah,
violence
yeah.
is
And
cutting.
did you ever avoid your finances?
I That's the one thing. Like I've always been really good. So I guess half and half. So I've always been really good at like paying stuff off on time and just like knowing where my bills are and how all of that's looking. But I never looked at it full picture. That part I was avoiding. I
Mm.
was avoiding looking at it full picture because I didn't I didn't want to know where it was. Like I didn't want to know that I was in debt. I knew that. So I didn't want to know how far in the hole I was. I keep using this whole analogy, sorry.
I no, I think it's help. And I think you have to unmute.
I must have
Yeah.
accidentally muted myself. Sorry. But yeah, I think that's actually fairly common. Commonplace that people avoid looking at their finances, especially when you know that you are in debt. So you're certainly not alone there. But looking at it, and once you actually start to target it, will you say that it made you feel better? Like, would you even use the term that you were able to build momentum?
Yeah. Once I paid off I had 4 credit cards. The first one I paid off was the one with the highest interest, highest balance, highest like monthly
Mm.
payment. Once I paid that off, like I took a deep breath and I was like, okay, this is the feeling that I wanted to I want to continue feeling. So we're just gonna take that payment and
Mm.
put it somewhere
Mm,
else and keep going. I'm doing the avalanche
Yeah, yeah.
approach. And just having that first one paid off, that made a world of a difference to my psyche.
I love that. And I
that's
could feel
perfect.
it. Yeah, that, it was like a weight that was lifted and you're like, okay, I can do this. I love that. And so shifting gears now to the future, like what I know that you started talking a little bit about wanting to travel, but also want to use this time to, so that you can chat with Anna about like what are the best strategies as you start thinking about investing, maybe like tax advantaged investing or anything like that that you'd want to, chat with Anna about while we're here.
Yes. So I started a side hustle in June. I am a YouTube content creator now in my spare time.
Awesome.
I had 100,000 views today. I hit that milestone. It's amazing.
Congratulations.
Wow.
I know it hasn't been 6 months yet. I hit 6 months next week, and it's out of this world. I can't believe it. So I know I'm gonna make money. I'm gonna make
Amazing.
so much more money. So my thing is,
Right.
how do I avoid lifestyle creep? And how do I like think outside the box? How do I let myself dream and have bigger goals?
Mm.
So I'm scared of having the bigger goals and then going too
Mm-hmm.
fast where I'm like swipe swipe, and I don't want to do that. Like that's what I don't want to do.
Sure. Sure. So I think with both of those, what it all really boils down to is mindset and making sure. So I'll answer them kind of separately. So in terms of lifestyle creep, which is very common, one of the ways to avoid that is to actually plan for those emotions that come along. Because if you wait until you're in the moment where you have this big sum of extra cash, or you make it and you get a windfall, if you wait until that actually happens, the problem is at that point you're going to somewhat be reactionary in the sense that it's already here, and now you need to decide what happens when you're probably in an emotional state, which is probably excitement, which is nothing wrong with that. But if you actually put a plan in place, it's kind of twofold. One is that you are putting a plan in place to know what to do with that additional money when it comes in, but it's also believing that it's coming, right? So if you already have that plan in place, it's not a oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. It's absolutely this happened. I planned for it. I made it happen, and here's where it's supposed to go. And so that's why in the beginning I asked that question of what does it look like for you when you get debt free? Because you're going to be a new person. And I think that that's what a lot of people don't consider is your lifestyle will change and your life will change. So what does it feel like to not have to go to a 9 to 5? What does it feel like to be a YouTube sensation? That's something that you likely haven't experienced before. So it's almost impossible to completely plan for it, but to start visioning what that looks like, how you want it to look, and then how you allocate your money to match those goals. I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. Does that make sense?
Yes, I am going to make an Excel tab and I am going to put my goals in. And then
I support it.
that's what my brain is calculating. I'm like, I'm gonna put an Excel tab and I'm going to do different goals and I'm going to have like different places that I want to go. How much would that be? So that's gonna be my goal of how much money I'm gonna
Mm.
put in each of those accounts, and then we're gonna figure out, okay, which milestone is going to pay for which thing.
Hmm.
That's where we're
And so,
headed.
what was the other question?
Um. Oh,
I know the first one was lifestyle creep.
yeah. How do I let myself dream? Like, how do I, without being
Ooh.
scared? I know, I know. How do I just like
We could be
let
here for
go?
hours if we talked about this.
It's
Now,
such a good
Tanya, I think
question.
you could
Yeah.
probably actually, yeah, I think you could probably relate to this as well, Tanya,
Hmm.
because in this, I've actually seen this a lot in some of my recent coaching sessions where we talk about a scarcity mindset versus a growth mindset. And no, Tanya, with you having that entrepreneurial spirit, there is that growth mindset there where there's this idea of abundance. This can happen. There's enough for me, and I'm able. Whereas with the scarcity mindset, we often think in a very linear fashion, where we think that we're supposed to just hit these goals one by one, and if we don't hit one of them, then everything is over with. But in reality, it goes a little it's a little more discombobulated. So I guess to kind of help with that, my question to you, and this may sound completely unrelated, but what is your first memory of money?
um, I feel like I remember. I This just came like right when you asked. I remember my dad was a cab driver, so he would come home with like back in the day there was no Uber, so he'd just come home with wads of cash. So I would help him count it.
Mm.
And I knew that
Ooh.
our rent was a certain amount, so I knew that like 2 days of his work was like a month worth of rent or like something like that. And like it was, I feel like had that scarcity mindset, or like that mindset of we're just passing by, because it was like, okay, you get one toy, you only get new clothes right before school starts, you get one pair of sneakers. And there was a point in time where my brother and I were the same shoe size, so it's like we have 3 pairs of sneakers now.
Now you share. Yes.
So it
Yeah.
was definitely like we had enough, but that's it. Like there was no more. There was like no real savings. It was like we're gonna do this month by month, day by day, and hope for the best kind of thing.
That's so powerful in terms of that story, because I, obviously didn't know that, but talking about the scarcity and the growth mindset, that's exactly where it comes from. And I've noticed that a lot, especially with women, particularly women of color. It's like there's this idea that there's not enough. And I think when you ask the question of how do I allow myself to dream big and not have that fear, it's kind of going back to where you started and looking at it as the adult Rosie and saying, like, look at where I've come, look at what I've done. This isn't my story anymore. There is more than enough, and I can create it. And I think that that's really the tough part about it, because I've seen it time and time again. It's those old narratives, they don't go away unless you actually target them and confront them.
Whew,
And
yeah,
I know for
felt
just my,
that.
oh, go ahead, Tanya.
And now I'm just gonna say I really felt that. I think that Rosie, when you were sharing a bit about your family's history, it kind of reminded me of, my family background, where, and I think it's pretty common in immigrant backgrounds where, our parents, their relationship with money was like all around survival. So it was very much a survival mindset. And then they try, and that's how they still talk about, money. I remember when I first got an offer to work in finance in New York, I was so excited. And I knew I couldn't actually tell my parents because they would be afraid that like I was moving to New York. I was, embarking on this new journey. And sometimes I think it's important to break away from those narratives. And that's the first time for me when I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm scared. And like, it's a city I've never been to before, lived in before, but I'm going to do it. I'm just going to move. And yeah, and I think that a lot of what you said around, reconstructing these narratives, because, our parents were focused on survival, but I see like, children of immigrants, they're more focused on like self-actualization and like, how do we
Mm,
become the best version of ourselves? How do we kind of break barriers that existed for us before? And I think
right.
that that could be one way that you could start to think about this is like, you're breaking these generational curses and you're setting a new path,
Mm,
not just for you, but for future generations, and setting an example for people around you.
Yeah. And something else
I love it.
something else I just thought about in that same like realm of thought is that a lot of times we are our parents' retirement plans, and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
just
Mm.
so much pressure. Like not only do I have to save for my retirement, I got to take care of you. Like man, this is a lot. So that's, I'm going to add that to the things that I need to put in my goals.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it's also exciting. I try to reframe it as more of an opportunity to be able to take care of them because they made so many sacrifices. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
have the opportunity to take care of my parents, like, I would love that. So I think it's also an exciting goal to be able
Yeah.
to do that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Give them a good life.
And I think you can also use it as a motivating factor. It's just this kind of making sure that you have your own mask on first,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you yourself are financially stable, because what I think will help you is to think about all the things you can do when this isn't even a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you get to that point of financial independence where it's not, it doesn't bother you to think about supporting someone else or what you may be able to do. Like there's a certain level of financial independence that can be reached, and that comes with that growth mindset of, you know what, this can be done.
Yeah. And I kind of want to go back too to potentially these moments where, and I think this is really common, actually, it happens a lot too, just in career paths, where you get really close to a goal and then sometimes you'll self sabotage. So I want to hear
Mm,
like maybe some advice, Anna, of like what has worked for your clients, and maybe Rosie, if you've experienced that at all.
sure. I could go. I definitely think it happens. I think the term we normally use is imposter syndrome, maybe, where we are doing very well, we're excelling, and yet we kind of don't feel like we belong, or for whatever reason, it's not actualizing itself, and so we sabotage in ways that sometimes we don't even think about. And I think the really first step of that is to enlist the help of a coach or a community where people can actually help you identify things that you might not be seeing for yourself. I know that I can speak for a client that I'm working with now, where she is a small business owner with an opportunity to really grow right now, and she won't take the opportunity. And when I asked why, she said, because if this doesn't work out, I don't have anyone else to fall back on. And I think that's a common feeling for us when we don't have wealthy parents or family members, is if this fails, everything falls. But we have to realize that that's a scarcity mindset, that is, you know, us really operating out of fear. And so what helped her was I let her know that the person that you fall back on is you, and understanding
Woo.
that we've worked very hard to get to where we are. We have everything that we need.
Mm.
And I know it's hard because we live in a society where oftentimes we're not valued or told how amazing we really are. But especially if you're a business owner and you're out here and you're doing what needs to be done, you have you to fall back on.
I love that. I love that. Like, you are enough. You are everything that you need.
It's
Those are
you.
good
Mhm.
affirmations. Yeah, yeah. Rosie, did you ever feel that way? Or
Yes.
can you share a little
So
bit about that if you're comfortable?
you are enough is definitely one of the affirmations on my vision board. I will be working on my vision board this weekend, so this is perfect timing. But right
Great.
before I signed up for Snowball Premium, shameless plug, um, I was I was feeling that way. Like I was so close to paying off my credit cards, and I was self sabotaging. I was self sabotaging by ordering out like nobody's business, and I was planning on spending more money on vacations. I was away for Thanksgiving and on Christmas
Mm.
presents. Like I was just like, I'm almost done paying it off. What's a couple more $100 on it? Like that kind of mindset. And then I talked to Tanya and she was like, no, that's not what we're gonna do here. So
I think I
I
said it a
told,
little nicer than that, but yeah.
yes. But
It's
what
not
I
gonna
heard,
happen.
what I needed to hear was no. So
Yeah, I
Tanya,
mean, it is,
um,
yeah.
yeah, Tanya knocked me down on the ordering out thing. She was just like, "What if you don't order out? Like, what if you just buy food that's easy to make?" And I was just like, "Well, that's a great point. Why don't I do that?" So the last time that I ordered was like November 1st or something like that. And then I
Wow.
did not order more food in November. And it was
That
definitely,
is
Wow.
huge.
yeah. I mean, as someone who is ordering 3, 4 times a week, sometimes on the weekend I'd order every single meal because I didn't feel like going into the kitchen. Like that was a really big move. And a lot of it
Yeah.
came like anytime I felt like I wanted to order food, I would like reflect, okay, why do we want to do this? Or I'd think, do you want to order food or do you want to pay off your credit cards in January? Choice is yours.
Good point.
Yeah. And having Tanya on speed dial text, there was one time I told her I was reflecting and I'm like, okay, so I wanted to order food and I asked myself why, and myself said because I don't want to run out of the grocery food that I have sitting in my fridge.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I was thinking.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so I was having a scarcity mindset about the food that's already sitting in my fridge, so I was going to order food so I wouldn't eat that food. Because that made total
Wow.
sense at some point in my life. And now it's just like
that's so
no.
interesting. Yeah, because that's so interesting. Because that would never cross. I have the opposite anxiety where I get anxious if I don't eat all the food in my fridge. Because I'm like, it's gonna go
That's
bad.
interesting.
Yeah.
Don't waste food. Yeah, no, that's like
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
now,
so interesting.
yeah. So
Yeah.
now when I go grocery shopping, I buy things that go well together so that I can make complete meals. And it's not like an episode of Chopped every time I'm trying to cook things. So that's definitely helped. And even just having Tanya's guidance around gift giving for Christmas. And I think I missed
Mhm.
the Zoom call, and she's like, okay, what's a habit that you want to change this month? And I'm like, girl, I've made this budget and I don't want to spend this much money on people, and I've come to a realization that I want to give them a lot of money because I want to show them that I love them a lot. And like just being able to
Mhm.
say that out loud to someone else and them not tell me I'm crazy. And Tanya said, well, why don't you just get them something like crafty? I'm like, okay, I don't cook, so that's not a thing. And we landed on calendars, and I gave people who are really special to me calendars of pictures of us. Like my best friend lives in San Francisco. Clearly have not seen her in a long time. And the last time we were together, we did the Disney Princess Half Marathon in Disney.
Oh.
So we were like
Fun.
two big kids. We did all the parks. It was amazing. So we had like so many pictures of that, and last time I went to visit her, and I'm like, okay, that's 12 months worth of pictures. So I put it together, and doing that made me feel so much better than if I would have sent her a more expensive gift of something that I'm just ordering online, that I'm not really like, yes, I'm putting thought into it, but it's not the same kind of love as me making something for her.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love it. And it's awesome that you could have, saved a lot of money too, just creating something that's thoughtful. And at the end of the day, your friends don't care. I mean, I would imagine, your close
Right.
friends shouldn't, care too much about the price tag, and that shouldn't, so I
Well,
think
what she
that,
told me,
yeah.
what she
Yeah.
told me, and I almost cried. So I was
Oh.
kind of feeling anxious. So I'm like, okay, just so you know, this year's gift is not sparkly, but it's from the heart. And she said, you could have just sent me a hug. And I was like, girl, you're going to make me cry. Like,
Aw.
Yeah, that's like
I
what
love
friends
you.
are, right? Like I would
Yeah.
never
Right.
expect a friend to give me like something super expensive.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So it's just like,
Well,
you never know.
yeah. Well, I know we're wrapping up. Just to, wanted to kind of give you all a chance to leave any final thoughts as we sign off. Are there any other pieces of advice or takeaways that you wanted to share with anyone listening that maybe, part of, maybe having debt and just starting their debt-free journey, like any parting advice that you have for them? Either one of you can go first.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll go first then, I guess. Like my parting piece would just be, hey, start where you are. Start by figuring out where you are. Make a plan to get to where you want to be, and then account for hiccups in the road, because understanding that if you listen to this podcast and you know that if your mindset isn't there, then it's very hard to get to that change, that end goal. So get started is the first step, but also prepare for life's inevitable hiccups.
Yeah,
Love
and just
it. Love it.
adding on to what Tanya said, it is about mindset. Don't feel bad if you make a mistake. Don't feel bad if like something bad happens, or like if you spend money and you really didn't mean it. I feel like if you just reflect and understand, like, okay, I did that because I was sad and wanted chocolate. It's like, okay, well, perhaps we should just keep chocolate around the house so that you're not ordering Dunkin' Donuts at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's like those kinds of things where if you can just understand what happened, reflect on it, know that it's okay. It's not a perfect journey. No one's journey is perfect. And just be kinder, which is something I'm learning. Just be kinder to yourself and know that if you keep pushing on, you will get to the goal because it's there for you.
Love it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. And Rosie, I'll make sure to ask you for the YouTube link so we can link it to the podcast episode. And I'll also link to where you can sign up for Snowball Premium and schedule a session with Anna. Well, thank you both so much and happy holidays.
Thank
Thanks. Same
you.
to
Happy
you.
holidays.